Welcome back to Bazaar. I'm Eco, and it's time for another patch note review. Wait, sorry, wrong patch notes. No, to find the patch notes, you have to come to howbazaar.gg and see their data mined patch notes. And the reason I'm particularly salty about this is because today we're going to show off exactly why that's a problem. Howbazaar.gg can very accurately show how things have changed. They cannot show things that are mechanically new or different or bug fixes. There are so many changes that will not be covered without official patch notes, and right now that's a huge problem. Because if you just read the patch notes, you would come away with a very incorrect depiction of what the patch does. And no doubt, this video will to some degree be inaccurate because I won't know of some of the changes that have happened that are not covered on this page. Let's get into the patch and start talking about what's been changed. First, Catalyst has been completely reworked. It's now a bronze tier loot item, it's no longer a reagent, and it's available for everyone because it's loot, it's not a Mac item. Instead of its old effect, now it says when you sell this, transform your leftmost small item. This means that Transform is now available more to everyone from the loot system, and it's also much more available to Mac for reasons we'll see later involving his cards. A lot of them now just have the text, at the start of each day, get a Catalyst. And I think that's generally really good. It gives everyone more room to play with the Transform mechanic, and in particular, it will, when we see the later changes, give a lot more room to play for Mac specifically with the Transmute mechanic. I don't know if it's enough, we'll have to play with it and see, but it's a great step in the right direction, and it's a much better loot item than Truffles, which I'm glad they're listening to the feedback, is no longer a loot item. That's a massive W. As salty as I am about the patch notes, I am pretty consistently very happy about the actual contents of the patch. Also, they moved the R in Harkuvian Launcher to a Harkuvian Launcher. I have no idea. I didn't know they were different. I'm gonna mess this up forever now. I'm never gonna get it straight. But the big catalyst for my opening tirade about not knowing what the patch actually does is the Dooley reworks. Let's start with the core, because I'm going to cover all the cores first, because they've all been reworked. They all start at silver now. I believe they're all sellable now. I don't really know, because it says hidden tags unsellable has been removed, but that might just mean that unsellable is not a tag anymore. I don't know. I hope that that isn't what it means, and I believe it's not. We're about to test it. Now the armored core no longer scales its shield with level. It's just flat shield 20, and the reason is because its effect has been reworked to this, and shield items to the right of this gain, and then a new amount of shield that's higher than the old at every tier, and much higher at the higher tiers. This is really good. Essentially, all the cores need to be reworked in some way similar to this effect change, and this is a much better core than it used to be. We're going to skip around a little bit to the next core. The companion core now starts at silver as well. Its cooldown now scales down with tier instead of just giving you more and more useless haste duration, and that's really, really good. That is a much better effect than the old companion core, because typically when you're using companion core, it's because you care about the number of haste applications or the number of triggers of the companion core. So this is a much stronger effect than it previously had. It's still probably going to be frequently outclassed by the DJ Robot core, but it's much better than it was. Moving on to the crit core, it's also been vastly improved, having the damage it used to have at diamond at every tier, and now this and items to the right have 30, 45, 60% crit chance, just massively increased numbers. This is so high that I'm scared of it, and I'm also terrified of the ignition core now. It no longer scales its own burn value with tier, instead it buffs its own burn value when it goes off, and the amount it goes off, or the amount it buffs by rather, is the same at silver, higher at higher tiers. I don't think this is going to be like super problematic the way old ignition core was. If anything, I'm much more scared of crit core than I am of this, but all of these reworks are really good. Even though the cores are generally getting massively buffed, in the previous patch, it was an important thing that at some point during the run I could transform my core so I could sell it to get stash space, and that would give me the room to hold a bunch of pivots to builds that were actually usable, unlike late game cores. It's really important that they buffed all the cores, and I'm very happy with all the changes to them. Moving on. Next up, we got the core. It's 50 damage at all tiers now, and the main effect of increasing its rank is scaling its cooldown down all the way to 4 seconds at diamond. That's really interesting, really powerful. For the first time in a long time, I'm interested in playing with the core, and I hope it's not too strong, but it's very interesting, and I'm very hyped about it to them. Moving on to the next one, we're going to have the weaponized core, dealing a flat 20 at all tiers, but now it buffs itself so it doesn't need to scale its own damage. And weapons to the right gain 20, 30, 40, again, more at diamond, but more at every rank, just more tilted heavily towards the late game where the cores fell off a cliff. Every core got a pretty massive buff. And if you read all that and heard me say all that, and you're like, wow, the cores are super broken, the game's fucked, Dooley's just going to kill me day one. The damage on crit core is insane. He just starts with crit core and kills Mac immediately, right? The answer to that is no. In the background, I started up a game on Dooley Because something not included in howbazaar.gg's patch notes, something that comparing new data to old data will never show, is new mechanics. I didn't start with a core in this run. I don't have one. Now, when Dooley levels up to 3, you get core initialization. Choose one of 5 cores. So you will see all but one core in every run, and you will get to pick at level 3 as opposed to your normal level 3 reward. And if you don't remember previously, level 3 would have been the first time you got the reward of a blank tier item, a blank tier loot item plus 2 gold, or a third randomized option. So now you get to pick from the cores at level 3, and while thematically I would like to start with some sort of useless deadweight core that did literally nothing just to make a little bit of sense of this, I really like this. This is a much better system. You get to pick your core after the first day or 2, and that will let you better inform your core choice than it used to be. Additionally, all the cores are better, and starting core will have less of a drastic impact on your day 1 results. It's also worth noting that Dooley does still start with 4 less gold because of the core he will get at level 3. And theoretically, for the chance of winning this run, it's probably best to pick a core and not sell it, but I am just going to grab a core. Obviously, with this burn build, it's best with the ignition core, and I can just sell it. It's not that unsellable has been made into some other mechanic and not a tag. You can just sell the cores now. So that absolutely massive change is probably one of the main things this patch is doing, completely reworking how cores work on Dooley. And I'm completely here for it. I think that's a massive win for the game. It's a much better design. I just wish Dooley started with a deadweight core that did nothing for thematic reasons. Zooming in for your benefit, let's get through the rest of the patch notes in order. 3D printer has been not reworked at all. They've just cleared up the text on all of these sorts of effects to clarify that they turn into equivalent tier copies, and it's less confusing now. Arc Blaster's down a second. I love seeing changes like this. Arc Blaster wasn't good. Make it a bit faster. See if it's better. Black Spider and Blue Beetle got the nerf that I was really expecting them to get. I wasn't sure if Black Spider would get it. I was expecting Blue Beetle to get this hit. They're both tier adjusted. The old gold is the new diamond, and bronze tier is straight up removed. Because having a high tier Black Spider in the middle really did accelerate them tremendously, and the main broken late game thing was Blue Beetle lockout. I think they'll still be good, but they'll be much harder to get consistently just by having some of the linchpin bugs be at silver, and they'll also just be fundamentally less powerful than they were. I think this is a good way to change them, and I'll have to see it in play to see if it's done enough to reduce their power, or even if it's gone too far and killed them. I genuinely don't know at all where in the spectrum of nerfs this falls until I get to play with it, because seeing something like a rarity shift from bronze to silver making them so much rarer might actually be more impactful than the nerf on the item itself. Next up, we have a Bomb Squad rework, and we're going to see a lot of items for Dooley get this sort of rework. The burn value no longer scales, the haste value no longer scales. It's always burn 6, and adjacent friends are always haste 2. Now the cooldown scales from 10 seconds at bronze all the way down to 4 seconds at diamond, and that is a much better card. Even at bronze tier, the fact that it burns for 2 more 1 second slower, and with longer haste duration from adjacent friends, it's just straight up buffed at every tier. And this is good. Bomb Squad was an awful card before. It needed massive sweeping changes like this to really be playable. Moving down to Chem Snail, I wish I could say the same about it. Its cooldown's actually been increased by 1 second. In exchange, it has 33% more poison, and now instead of slowing for longer, it slows for more. And don't get me wrong, Dooley has good reason to want this effect more than the previous effect, but Chem Snail was already a 2-slot item that wasn't particularly exceptional. Increasing its cooldown by an additional second, I don't think was necessary for this change. And on the whole, I think Chem Snail might actually be worse. I think the builds that want Chem Snail want the new version more than the old one. And I think if you're just evaluating Chem Snail in a vacuum, if you're not looking at it as a Black Spider replacement or a Power Drill enabler, if you're doing anything else, this is just a direct and massive nerf. And in those builds, it's like a bit better, but you still don't want the Chem Snail. Chris Army Knife got a similar change to Bomb Squad, having a scaling cooldown with tier and a much higher base values that do not change. And again, even at bronze tier, just a better card. It's 1 second slower in cooldown and almost 3 times the effect. It is much stronger at bronze than it used to be. I still don't think you're going to play Chris very much, but with a cooldown of 4 seconds, that can probably do something at higher tiers. It's always hard to appreciate just how important having a fast item can be, so the fact that his cooldown can get that low as a baseline does mean something. We've already covered all the cores, so moving on to Copper Ed, same boat. Now it scales from its previous cooldown all the way down to 4 seconds at Diamond, and its values at Bronze are tripled to what its previous gold values were. Diamond doesn't exist anymore, and this is obviously a vastly better card. It's just good enough to play at bronze now. It's not just one poison doing nothing. At higher tiers, I mean, 4 seconds to trigger poison is not great, because it's just not doing a ton, but it's still a very fast item, and that might make it good enough to hit boards in some circumstances. I don't know if this is a good enough card to like be a staple in any board or anything, but it is vastly more playable than it used to be. I think all of these sorts of buffs are pretty great changes for the game. Coming down to Induction Aegis, you can see that it has the same sort of change, starting at 7 seconds, scaling down to 4 seconds at Diamond. Shield is 20 at all tiers for the previous gold value, Burn is 2 at all tiers, the previous silver value. And unlike some of the other cards that received this change, I would say that Induction Aegis is still kind of locked behind needing an Omega Ray or an an Ignition Core to be good enough. Because Burn 2 just doesn't do anything. Even if it's every 4 seconds, Burn 2 is a terrible effect. I will note that having these very fast shield effects on Induction Aegis at Diamond and also Copper Ed, that's an indirect buff to Armored Core, Armadillo, all that sort of stuff. Just having fast shield effects does matter. Laser Pistol just straight up down to 4 seconds. Power Standard just straight up down to 4 seconds. Again, very bad items, didn't see play, great to see them get buffed. On the whole, I'm just a fan of all these items buffed from Dooley so far. I want to see stuff like this for every character, every patch, where they look at the bad items and just do something to them, I don't care what. Up until now, the patch has been nothing but a massive W, and it's going to continue that streak, because Robotic Factory is the start of a trend in this patch that's fantastic. They've removed the old scaling crit chance effect from this, and now your friends have +1 multicast, and their cooldowns are increased by 2 seconds at gold and only 1 second at diamond. I think this is a really wonderful way to try to rebalance the multicast items and make them really meaningfully scale with their tiers. I think every single sort of effect like this was broken in some capacity, right? Everyone's gotten blown out by a Robotic Factory or a Shipwreck or a Boiling Flask. These items are incredibly good, and giving them the cooldown penalties will make them less oppressive when people hit them, but still worth playing when you find them. And I named those cards specifically, the Shipwreck and the Boiling Flask, because those also got this exact same sort of change. I will note, this isn't quite holistic. There are a couple of multicast cards, at least one that slipped through the cracks, because you'll note that we haven't talked about Bunker, which should have been at the top of the Dooley section. On the other hand, though, Bunker is fundamentally designed to scale defensive things and maybe doesn't need the same built-in limitations as something like Robotic Factory or Boiling Flask. Solar Farm is actually unchanged, it's just cleaning up the wording on it. We've already covered the cores. And Thrusters is one of my favorite changes in this whole patch. It's basically nothing but straight W's, except for the lack of official patch notes. Thrusters now start at silver tier. They no longer burn at all, and they also don't have a cooldown. They're just a passive item. Their passive effect is, the item to the left of this is a vehicle and has its cooldown reduced by 5, 10, 15%. So the cooldown reduction is largely in line with what it used to do, but only to one item, and now it grants that item the vehicle status. I think this is a much more interesting item, but it's also not clearly a buff to Dooley in general. So obviously, like, the top end is crazy, right? You turn your power drill into a vehicle, and you use that to enable a variety of vehicle skills that all go to the moon with a very fast vehicle. Whether it's cooldown reduction or scaling when you use a vehicle, there are plenty of skills where this enables them, and they're very powerful because of that. However, it's no longer active, so it makes you more vulnerable to crowd control. It isn't affecting both adjacent items, so it's worse in terms of overall speeding up your build, and because it doesn't burn you or your opponent, it is generally worse for a drill build, worse for anything that cares about status element spam, and much worse for enabling Pyrocarbon, whose only trigger at this point I think is just Nitro. There's no other self-burn you have access to. So this is also a pretty direct and massive nerf to Pyrocarbon, which is one of my favorite cards, and makes me a little bit sad. Despite the fact that I think it's mostly a nerf, I don't think that this is a bad card. I think it's a very interesting design. I think it's a thematic win, because, like, that's the whole opening cutscene of the game, right? Is Dooley gets the thrusters and it turns him into a vehicle. That's what it does. So I really like this design, and I think it's a cool card. I also think it's objectively a nerf to Dooley. It's just not really a nerf that matters in any capacity. Oh, also, before I move on, I will note that the first time you fall below half health each fight, do a thing enchant design is generally awful, and every single thing that uses this trigger needs to rework the enchant, because right now this is just a prank on new players when they find out they skipped their enchant. You just don't enchant items that have this text. This is unusably awful, and you'd be better off, for new players' sake, just having no enchants on things that only have this trigger. And the real reason that it has all of those useless enchants is to make it not always get shiny and deadly, which would pretty clearly be crazy if you could random this and only get multicast or 50% crit chance on the thing it's buffing, right? But, like, this enchant timing is just genuinely awful, and no item is good with enchants if it uses that timing. Rounding out the Dooley changes, welding helmet's just straight up buffed at every tier. More so on burn than on shield, in my opinion, but still nice to see. Welding helmet wasn't particularly good, and it probably deserves the buff. And then maybe the one definitive L, in my opinion, is Yellow Mantis got tier adjusted. I mean, like, come on. He's the trash Mantis, man. I'm meaning about him not actually getting used even in bug builds in my guide videos. I have a trash Mantis emote in my Discord. He's just the most replaceable bug and generally by far the worst of the bugs. He's not bad, he's sufficient, but I don't know that he deserved a nerf. And I suppose for like internal consistency, he's effectively multicasting a status ailment. He should work the same way as the other bugs. But yeah, tier adjusting him and making his tiers also universally worse. Oof. I don't know, Yellow Mantis needed this. He was already the worst bug, and now it's actually a trash Mantis. Maybe I'll go from like memeing and being ahead of my time to actually everyone agrees on the Mantis sucking. This is not good for Mantis, man. Which brings us to the Mac changes, and I think the Mac changes are generally fantastic. I kind of still think Mac is way too strong in the early and mid game. This patch will not change that, but I appear to be in the minority in that opinion. We'll see if eventually nerfs do hit the early game. But for now, Mac is largely preserved as he was, and in fact, almost strictly buffed with these changes. Getting into it, Alembic now has the exact same effect at the start of each day, transform the small item to the left into a random potion, and get a catalyst. The fact that it says and get a catalyst at the end makes me think that if you just have an Alembic, it will not transform the catalyst that it generates, but I do not know yet. The Alodel, previously the multicasting poison item, now just has at the start of each day, get a catalyst. The exact same start of day text has been added to Alodel, Apothecary, and Athenor, although of note, Apothecary is getting the option of a catalyst in addition to a reagent. It's not getting an additional catalyst on top of that. Moving on to the Boiling Flask, it got a nerf that it really did deserve. It's been tier adjusted down to gold, its cooldown is now always 8 seconds, and as mentioned earlier, it has the exact same sort of effect, where because it's granting multicast, now it's also increasing the cooldown of those items. And I think Boiling Flask being one of the more problematic Mac cards, especially in conjunction with stuff like freeze lockout strategies, this is a really good balance change. Next up, Laboratory and Mortar and Pestle are both now giving start of day catalyst. Mirror has had its wording cleaned up because it's a copy effect and it was kind of unclear previously. Philosopher's Stone now gives a catalyst instead of a chunk of lead, which makes a lot more sense because a Philosopher's Stone giving you a chunk of lead implies you're failing the alchemy process. Instead, it gives you the means to enable it, which is just thematically more appropriate. Quicksilver's getting the same cleanup on wording, and Runic Great Axe had its deadly enchant changed because obviously giving 50% crit chance to something that has 100% crit chance doesn't do a whole lot. So that's just clearly better. The Show Globe was straight up tripled in effect at every tier. The old diamond is the new bronze, and you know, maybe it's good now. It was pretty unplayable previously, like just barely good enough to fit onto a mid-game board if you had nothing better. Now it might genuinely be a good card. It remains to be seen. Moving on down to Sifting Pan, previously it gave you small reagents and it gave you regen when you sold them. Now it gives you a catalyst and it gives you regen when you sell specifically a catalyst. And as it's the last card generating catalyst, I'll take a moment to say I think this probably fixes the problem Mac is seeing, where Mac did not have enough access to transmute mechanics. This should mean that you can just find a lead generator and find something to transform with by day 3 at the latest in pretty much every run. I think this is probably a massive quality of life improvement for Mac, and it probably also translates into some amount of power for Mac. It's also another W for income start on Mac because now you're going to be so much more reliably able to find the things to generate and transform lead. That's going to make it all the more important to have the money to buy them. Sunlight Spear now has a scaling cooldown with tier. I'm not sure if Sunlight Spear really deserved to be nerfed at silver, and I don't know that reducing its cooldown by 1 at diamond is a huge deal. But sure, why not? I don't really have an issue with that change. And apparently Venomandra's cooldown dropped at gold. I don't think I knew it did this. This is obviously not the intentional design of the card, so now it's the same cooldown at all tiers. And having rounded out max items, that brings us to Pig. The Aurora Dome has been straight up tripled in effect. The base shield didn't matter at all, but it's buffed at every tier, even at diamonds. And now the scaling shield value from freeze is tremendously more effective. Do I think it's going to be good? Probably not. Do I think it's going to be better and maybe playable? Yes. Luxury Kilos was frankly a kind of underrated item, but it wasn't a great item, and I think it deserves the buff it's getting here. Its cooldown's reduced by 1 second at all tiers, and it has triple the scaling when you sell a property. Frankly, you don't sell a lot of properties anyway. You usually get most of the value on this thing just by using a ledger or a rewards card, but that's greatly appreciated. The cooldown buff is greatly appreciated. I think it's a much more playable card now. It's not like so good that you're going to gravitate towards it, I think. It's not like fixer-upper tier, but it's much more reasonable to go into this early than it used to be. Next up, Money Tree is getting a full rework. It's been given the value tag. I'm guessing it didn't show up at Prospero before. Now instead of healing 40 and gaining heal when you sell a spare change, it heals equal to its value, and when you sell a spare change, it gains permanent value based on the quality of the money tree. It also reduces its cooldown by 1% for every value it has, much like Billboard, so this is sort of like somewhere between a fixer-upper and a Billboard, where it both has scaling value effect and scaling value cooldown. I'm not immediately picking up what the big use for a very fast heal item is going to be, but there's at least some merit where this could be a really strong thing worth enabling. There's no way that it's useless, and if nothing else, it's a new economy card for Pig to enable, and I think this is a better change. Because the old money tree was almost universally unplayable. There were very rare circumstances where that wasn't the case, but realistically, this is definitely a better card and a more interesting design. Speaking of, I don't know what Ointment does. Like, I know it used to do something. It might have been like heal equal to your gold every 6 seconds, some terrible effect. They just straight up stapled on cleanse half your burn and poison, which 1, it makes sense thematically, and 2, yeah, that just sounds like a buff that might make it playable. I'm very happy with that. As I said earlier in the video, if an item is bad, throw shit at it until it's not bad. This is a good example of that. Another Pig item is getting reworked as well. Robe now starts at bronze. Its cooldown now scales from 7 to 4. Its shield value is now a flat 100, which for a 7-second bronze item, that's kind of crazy. And then rather than scaling all your shield items every time it goes off, when you use an adjacent item, charge this 1 second. So it's sort of like the big shield equivalent to marbles. And I think at least for early game defenses, this is really, really strong. I'm still terrified to play something like this because a burn build can build up enough burn to kill you even with something like this in the early game. A poison build just goes under it. But this is a very strong effect and also just very fast. Like, you put this next to a matchbox at diamond tier in the late game, Robe is good. It's just a straight up good item right now. For all my problems with defensive items in a Mac meta, this is just really damn strong, and I'm expecting to see some strong things come out of this. It might even be too strong, but being a Pig item with shield effects, I'm inclined to believe it can't possibly be broken. Next up, Sana is just 50% better for healing and 100% better for generating regen. I think Sana is already good, but it was like specifically good with Matchbox and not generally with Burn, so maybe it does need this sort of buff, and being much better with Matchbox would be fine. I personally don't know that it needed this, but I don't look at this and think it's broken, so it's probably a fine change. They've also increased the scaling value by 50% on Silk Scarf, and yeah, sure, I don't think Silk Scarf was super viable previously, and I think increasing the scaling value on it is probably justified. And lastly, for Pig, previously Textiles said shield 10, 20, 40, 80 depending on tier. Now it's when you overheal shield by those amounts, which if you're like immediately popping off with a money tree, maybe it's much better. But in the vast majority of circumstances is just a nerf. I'll be interested in seeing if people can make this into like a really good item that actually does something, but personally I just don't see it at all. And last but certainly not least, Vanessa is getting a lot of changes as well, including a straight buff to Beach Ball. It now has 1 additional target at every tier, and this is fairly massive because previously high tier Beach Ball was just a good card. The issue with it was that at bronze and even silver sometimes, it just wasn't good enough. This probably just makes Beach Ball a very good mainstay tier item for aquatic builds. You'd probably still prefer Water Wheel in most circumstances, but this is going to be good enough a lot more often than it used to be. Next up, Darkwater Anglerfish is getting the buff it desperately deserved. It used to scale its cooldown down to 8 seconds once you got to Diamond. Now it starts at 8 seconds. The new Silver Darkwater is just the old Diamond, and then it gains 10 burn at every tier. This is a really substantial improvement to the card. It is much better than it used to be. It's not like straight up better than Lighthouse or anything, but it's definitely a lot closer to Lighthouse than it used to be and a much more playable than it was. Next, Dive Weights gains a starting ammo. I think that's a good change. I think Dive Weights was actually just a little bit weak in its old state, and I think this is the cleanest change to bring it into a better power level. Diving Helmet, despite how good it looked when it got reworked, saw exactly no play. So they've doubled its effect. It's probably pretty good now. I have to imagine we're going to see Diving Helmet doing some gross things, and with a number of powerful new shield cards, I'm actually thinking Mac's looking great, because all of these weapon builds are going to have a terrible time with these new defensive options, which is going to leave Mac open to get under them or scale over them. Next up, we have Elemental Depth Charge, which has been sort of equalized between its original slightly broken version that's honestly much too slow for the current meta, and the nerfed version we had last patch. It still starts at the old silver value, but it scales more per tier until it ends at the original diamond value. I think this is a good, elegant change, a nice buff to the card. We'll see where it lands. Apparently, Incendiary Rounds wasn't scaled on some of its enchants previously, so any change like that is good. Anyway, moving on down the list, we have Jellyfish, just way better with tier than it used to be, gaining an additional 2 poison at every tier. And at Bronze, that's not a meaningful change, but at every later tier, this is a much better card than it used to be. And at the very least, you'll see a lot more people using B1, B2 to upgrade their Silver Jellyfish in the early game for mid-game power. Speaking of making damage over time cards more worth upgrading, Lighter is tremendously better. 2 burns not really a lot better than 1, but once you're in a burn build, it's tremendously better when you're actually stacking it up and not losing it. And then it gains more burn at every tier, and it's just generally more worth upgrading. It's probably actually usable as a burn item now and not just a fast thing to carry a burn skill. Which brings us to the Lighthouse rework. It's changed from cooldown 7 seconds to 10, scaling down to 6 seconds with tier. Previously, it was 12, 16, 20 burn depending on tier, and now it's always 20 burn. I pretty much just consider this a buff. At lower tiers, 20 is so much higher than 12 that I don't think 3 more seconds on the cooldown is actually a nerf at all. It is probably very slightly nerfed at gold, it's hard for me to say, but it is definitely better at diamond. That additional second off the cooldown is a big deal. And Pufferfish is receiving the exact same rework that Angler was. Puffer was in a really bad state last meta, really all of Aquatic Vanessa was, so hopefully this will be a good step towards fixing it. But for the exact same reason we talked about with Robotic Factory and Boiling Flask, Shipwreck is taking the same nerf, where it's not just cleanly better, there is a downside to the tremendous additional power of all this multicast. One of the only buffs on this list where I looked at it and immediately laughed was Volcanic Vents. Its burn was tripled at every level. Now it's just a good card, right? At Bronze, that's going to deal 9 burn, and that's just pretty solid. A Bronze Volcanic Vents outside of a burn build just deals 45 damage every 7, which is perfectly fine. The moment it hits a burn build, it's tremendously better. It was already solid with burn skills. I think this is just a good card now. Previously, it was a little bit niche. You needed certain things to make it good enough. It's just good now. I just think this is a good change. It's nice to see cards where, rather than allowing you to play a burn build if you have burn skills, they're just good burn cards. Although, there was a point in time where just good burn cards universally resulted in burn being overpowered, so I'm hoping that's not the case, but I do like this change, even though I'm a little bit hesitant when I see those numbers. Next up, the poison scaling on Yeti Crab has been doubled. I think that's really good. Basically, outside of Depth Charge, Yeti Crab's pretty terrible, and on Depth Charge, this probably won't actually matter that much, because Depth Charge for the Yeti Crab just kills you anyway. This won't change that, you were already dead. And lastly, Zorkid is down 1 second to a 6 second cooldown. I think Zorkid was already good, so this is just making it really good. I don't think it'll be broken or anything, but I do like the change. I think 7 was a little bit awkwardly long for it, and I like seeing it down at 6. Before I wrap this up, as a reminder, I want to say that these are just the changes to cards that Bazaar.gg has picked up. This is not necessarily a full comprehensive list of changes. The simple fact is I can't know what all changed, and this is not a complete patch note video. It can't be, which is really unfortunate. And I don't want that to sound like I'm criticizing Bazaar.gg. They're wonderful. The game's community would be so much worse off without what they are doing for the game. And their tools are invaluable, not just to the community, but to me personally. I really appreciate what they do. But without official patch notes, there are things left out of these notes that are really problematic for us as players. For instance, the patch notes we're left to use and lack of real communication from Tempo Storm do not convey that you don't start with the core anymore. So I am sure that there are going to be a lot of bug fixes and mechanical changes that we simply don't know about. Like if they added a monster to the game, it's not here. And I don't yet know if that's because there are no new monsters or if that's just because new items aren't detected by this. And I don't even know if new items are detected by this. I don't think they are, but the bigger thing is mechanical changes and bug fixes not being detected by it. So be aware that this is not necessarily a comprehensive list of everything that was changed in the game. It's just me conveying to you what Bazaar.gg is able to pick up. There's probably more that we don't know yet that we'll learn in the coming days. On the whole though, from what I've read of these patch notes, it looks like nothing but really positive changes. Outside of specifically buffing the weaker archetypes and defensive stuff, outside of specifically nerfing the bug archetype and anything giving multicast, generally balance wasn't touched too much. I think they specifically hit the things that were really weak and the things that were clearly dominating the meta and decided to see how it would play from there. I really like all of the changes pretty much across the board. I think this is going to be a much healthier meta than the one we were just in. Anyways, that'll be all for now. Thank you for your time. If you want more Daily Bazaar content just like this, feel free to hit the subscribe button before you go. And if you could hit the like button while you're down there, I really do appreciate it. It helps boost the channel up in the algorithm, helps the channel grow, and it means a ton to me. Anyways, thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.